Hi everyone. Uh, so thanks everyone for joining this meetup. So we'll get started quickly. So we have four speakers today, four talks today, and our first speaker is Ravi. Uh, he'll be talking about forms with the React hook. Um, so without any further delay, we'll get started. So I'll invite Ravi to the stage. Hi Ravi.
Hi, Kiran. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm going to. Oh, my screen is shared already. Okay.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
All right. That's great. Thank you so much for organizing this meetup. Everybody in the meetup, very good afternoon, and glad to see you around. I'll start my talk by introducing the topic. So today we're talking about briefly about the React hook forms and mainly the use cases around how we organized using React hook forms. I chose this topic since it's simple and post lunch, it's a good starter. We have a very nice lineup of speakers going forward with an interesting set of topics to discuss. This one's going to be simple. So, just a quick brief about me. Always an engineer, got some good amount of experience under the belt. Right, I like to solve good problems, and all problems are good in that matter. Right. Good. I'm a happy startup enthusiast. Recently, we started something and already exited. That's where I'm fully employed at the moment at Open Financial Technologies. I take great interest in front-end architectures, especially after the strong footprints of React, Vue, Angular, Svelte, and there's a whole list of architectures and frameworks that have come into play, which provide a varied set of solutions across the entire horizon. As the domain goes, we are mainly into the fintech space, providing solutions for all range of enterprises, from SMEs to big enterprises to the entire range of enterprises, providing them APIs, ERP solutions, digital banking solutions, payments in that domain of things, and it's really exciting. It's growing really fast, and it's a nice place to be in. React hook forms, mainly the domain is around the hook form library. It's not very old. It's about probably a couple of years to maybe 3 years in the happening, and we've been using it over and over again. And they've consistently improved the entire library and the usage and the paradigms around it, and also great set of features coming out recently. Let's quickly see how it fits into our system. We have amongst the remaining set of libraries that we use, these are the main things that go along. So it's TypeScript, Next.js, common set of things there. Tailwind's been picking up the wind. We've not been very happy with Redux, so we've gone ahead and been a happy fan of Tanner Linsley, used React Query and are very impressed with that. We also use the React table from Tanner Linsley. We've picked up Xstate by David from Microsoft, and the ecosystem around that is amazing. It provides a range of solutions for state management, for our finance state automata, and it's very modular and very exciting. I could probably go about it for very long, but we stick to React hook forms for this session. Headless UI and React Select. This tech stack has evolved over a period of time, and being lazy coders, it's helped us develop quite a lot of solutions. With Next.js giving all the routing and server-side stuff, and React Query doing the heavy lifting on the state management and API handling, and the entire promise management on without needing the global states and caching and whatever the requirements are there for a usual mid-level sized application. So React hook forms fits well into the tech stack. Comparatively to any other set of frameworks that we saw for building forms, it's basically infrastructure level. You'll need to build the form components separately using probably the stylings of Tailwind or Material UI or anything that you fancy, but hooking it up with the form and providing validations, providing ground up performant components, and making it work along with the ecosystem of nested forms and all of that. It's very interesting and exciting to use. So why did we, or what were our main motives behind having the need to use a framework just for building infrastructure? So means the developer journey, right? We have developers coming in, going out, having the need to understand the framework behind the application and understand how things are wired. We were having problems trying to communicate the entire APIs or the interfaces and the contracts that were around the form building the tasks. So what happened with React Hook Forms, where we were able to separate the need for having to understand the whole thing, give a common set of instructions to developers, and they came on board much quickly than when we didn't have this in place, right? Also, since we have a startup background, the product, until we reach product market fit, we keep churning applications. So it was important to have this set abstracted out so that we don't keep doing the same kind of stuff of writing forms using use state or Redux Forms or something that's not performant, right? So the React Hook Forms provided a good base to create components that were very common to most of our applications, very neatly providing refs in place and using hooks, providing great documentation, and a host of things which we'll quickly discuss, right? The most important thing was the performance. We noticed that although when in the beginning we were writing on click handlers, on change handlers, on focus off, on whatever the input text provides or the input field provides, along with integrating with React Select, putting in checkboxes, radio buttons, the performance was very dull when we had a lot of fields on the screen. So that brought us to a problem that, how do we manage all these kind of things without having to write them our own, or having a developer put in considerable amount of effort to get a balance across the forms. So on looking up at React Hook Forms, it was very endearing to see that they had worked very hard on isolating the rendering, reducing the re-renders, making it very, very versatile, and identifying when what needs to get updated, right? That part was very well calculated and devised. So it acted like a super catalyst in our utility. So what are form components? You see this everywhere, anywhere, on mobile devices, on web devices, on chat windows, on except for voice and AR, you'd see form fields anywhere and everywhere. It's although since the beginning, since the 90s, you've seen Google have a simple text field. People have their own set of requirements when you come over to a form. It could be styling, it could be validations, it could be the need for putting in buttons into text fields, it could be having a search within your text field or a drop down. It could be multiple facets of what do you call streaming, and having to show predictable suggestions and all of that. I'm not going to go into the details as of showing code and helping you get started, because the documentation on the React Hook Forms are really, really good, right? You'd probably be excited to do it yourself. But what I'd like to introduce is some of the concepts that are already available on React Hook Form that, which if I would probably give you an introduction, would help you get started much, much better. So basically, you're able to create controlled and uncontrolled components using their controller widgets. They provide a host of hooks that you can wire up, for the context set of requirements or for the form states. if you want your to identify if your form is dirty or if the form has any fields that are not touched, right? So those kind of things are very easily addressed. Going further, there's also well devised ways of uh, putting in dependent fields. You can have watched elements which can devise for other conditions to render other components in your form. So I'd like to take a use case of acquiring data for a person. So a person could have multiple addresses in a given state. He could have multiple houses. So the main things are his name, his email ID, right, his date of birth, and then he could have a list of addresses. Now, if you were to go on and devise the ways of how you want to do this, it can get very cumbersome very soon, and you would have much more complex use cases that have similar requirements of nested fields. With the use of React Hook Forms, more recent versions, they have use array fields, which provides for having nested forms for objects that are within arrays. Use array fields, which can provide for handling, appending objects at the end, or inserting into a specific place, or deleting a specific object from the list. And these all fold into the main object that is part of the entire form control. So it's very well organized in terms of how you'd be able to use it, and the hooks that are provisioned around making the best use of the context, and the form states and the field arrays, and especially the validations are what impressed us the most. So I'd like to dive a little bit more into the ability that React Hook Form provides in terms of providing a layer of abstraction over and above the form fields. It's very evident or very common to see us developers not having to use a component library that the base framework or the solution engine is trying to provide. Now, this could be a problem with the framework that is being available, or this could be a problem with our understanding of how to use it. But when we looked at React Hook Forms, there was very less that the end developer who's developing the forms, the end forms, needed to understand, right? So it made the component design very simple. So all the field references, so if you have an input text, or if you have a React select, or if you had a checkbox, they were all within a controller, and they were all managed using refs, right? The amount of prop drilling from top down was very low because everything was managed by their own form context providers. So there wasn't additional props that were necessary to be passed, like on click, on change, on focus off, all of those things, right? They had a good pattern of using headless UI, right? We were able to easily develop molecules from the atomic design structure to layer our input fields, labels, validations, right? Whatever that was required for a specific form input to be devised and componentized and kept separate from the form that was being developed. The usage of the forms also played a strong role using the use form context, because we never had to necessarily pass any of the references. They were obtained from the use form context, be it the watch fields where you were able to watch the values that were being changed, or the set of errors that were being generated on validation, or it could be the set values if you were setting specific values from another dependent object. So the design of the library is very smart, is very well thought out, and is very decisive, along with being well documented. So these were some of the things that were very impressive. Going into a bit more details amongst why the choice and how the appreciation. Validations. Now, these are every form field. You don't want someone passing a phone number in an email field. That's evident, right? But then how do you implement that? You would either need a on change, then put a regex, and then evaluate, find ways to render the error message. And then if it's squeezing in, how do you render that? So This, we didn't want the developer to handle it himself on every necessary opportunity. So validations were kept separate, where the developer just had to write a schema using Yup. Yup is a library that helps you devise schema for your models, and you are able to write validations for that schema, and it's very flexible. If you browse through the Yup GitHub repo, the documentation is very interesting and neat, and you will be able to do dependent validations on the fields, and post the entire individual field validation. You could do a complex field or a composite field validation, which is also very exciting, right? There was also very less code to write, and that's an important factor, because it's at times good for developers to be lazy and have the ability to not write more code, where they can produce more bugs, right? So that was an opportunity. Nested form fields, although they weren't there initially, which was a hassle, because we were finding it difficult to the structure of putting in field names was not well versed in the beginning, and over the very recent releases, it's matured and it's become very well organized. Array fields, form fields were another set of requirements that were well solved in this architecture. It provides for, you could use the low-_get to deep nest a field name from a model schema, and that was very helpful. The context usages, as we discussed earlier, there's a root context for any form that you have, and you can have nested forms which are dependent on these things. Subscriptions, and you could watch the field value of the object from anywhere, any child component that was in the tree of the component form, right? This is the ability to create controlled and uncontrolled components. Hooks, very well organized hooks. We picked up a few patterns of how to write hooks from this library, and it was pretty very useful. We also learned how to be natural in explaining how the libraries should be are behaving, and what a user can expect from a developer devised product or a library that is exposed to a whole set of users who share a common set of problems. And of course, being old school, being towards the end of Java or Scala kind of things, types were an important thing, and JavaScript, coming into the JavaScript world, TypeScript is a boon. So React hook form provided for a good range of all the hooks, and everything is very strongly typed and very well spelt out. So it was very useful to have that in structure in place. What are the other paradigms, or what are the other libraries that are present, and why didn't we choose them, versus why did we choose React hook form, would be a next question that would come into play, right? Initially, we were just using set state in the React class times, right? When we wrote a class X extends React component, and then we set a set state, we do a validation, right? And this was all piling up. So then we moved on to Redux Forms. Now, Redux Forms had its own set of things, because when the global state changes, the entire thing re-renders, and the validation eventually becomes slowing down the input fields. Maybe it was an implementation issue, but it turned out to be an issue, right? Then we had the advent of the usage of Formic. Formic was good. Formic was really good, very almost similar in terms of usage. But then if you compared the graphs for the first time renders, or how the renders are number of re-renders, or if a form field changes, do the other ones get re-rendered? These things took play when we had really long forms. So we had to evaluate, we had to put into place an evaluation criteria whether this was actually a problem that we were trying to solve. Apart from that, the rest of the things are that the library has, which React hook form doesn't have any module dependencies. It's free it has no package dependencies. React hook form is much lighter. It's just about, I think, I don't remember the exact KB size, but it's pretty light. The React hook form has very not very frequent, but they have scheduled release cycles which are very stable and not too breaking changes. There are sometimes some things that they explain well, the reasoning behind it, so it's well absorbed and not too difficult to switch over. Of course, from a marketing kind of thing, the number of downloads on React Hook Form has grown very fast in a very short speed of time. So that's something that you can credit to React Hook Form versus Formix. But Formix been there for a long time. They have continuously solved problems. A lot of people tend to appreciate, and we do appreciate as well. I think I'm almost there. I would definitely recommend React Hook Form. The documentation is really good. The demo site shows you, how to quickly start using things. Basically, you have a wrapper of form, and then there's some on-submit methods. You have validations. You can register your fields, right? And it can be used on React Native mobile apps as well. They have good support for that. Do check it out. It's on that link that's there. And there's a really good set of documentation. Validations are top notch, as in you're able to put in validations very easily. And so using it is top notch. Definitely make it essential to be used in any of the applications that you're having to use forms. So definitely give it a go and check it out. That's about me. That's up actually. That's all that is. At Open, we do a lot of we solve a lot of exciting problems. If you think that, and we always have openings for really really good developers. And if anyone wants to have a good try on solving some really new and exciting problems, do knock me up. That's where you can find me, or you can directly email the HR at whatever email ID that is at the bottom. Um, yeah, that's about it. I think I've taken lesser time, Kiran.
Hi Ravi. Yeah, nice talk. Uh,
I
yeah,
kept it short so that it's not too overbearing after lunch.
yeah, good. So we have like couple of questions. I think few more questions might come in. So maybe I will. So the first question is regarding the tech stack. Why you have choose Nest.js.
Certainly, certainly. That's a really good question. So Next.js provides for a set of solutions that are available on multiple systems, but put together. Next.js hosted on Vercel. That's a better solution that we're looking at. In terms of scaling, we have requirements of white labeling, where we sell our solution as part of another brand. So we are able to easily hook up environment variables without having to even change branches or create a separate branch for a white label. Just by using environment variables at the runtime, we are able to switch over. Auto scaling is one thing, right? Next.js provides for micro front ends, which is a exquisite thing that we'd like to. We are still experimenting and it's working well, but the multi-zone thing under Next.js is extremely useful. So that's another thing there is. And along with that, there are some optimized things like the next image and the next header and all of this, the entire blocks that Next.js provides is a good way to go forward.
Great. So we have one more question from Pratik. Can we create multi-step form using React Hook Form?
Right. So this has nothing to do with the hook form, but if you're looking for a wizard kind of thing, you're looking for something like a state machine manager. So there is a lightweight state machine example on the React hook form where you are able to devise a wizard, and the components that go into the steps, they can be part of the implementation that's outside the hook form's requirement. But since all of that go into the form provider, you are able to excerpt the value that was in the previous step and utilize it for any of the dependent validations or dependent things that are popping up for future steps.
Great.
So there's
I
one
think
question from Pratik itself. Initial value field, but not in hook form. So in hook form is also there. Um, it's just that it's a default value that you can feed to the provider, the use form, and then you can keep resetting it based on how and when you don't want it to appear in the form fields.
yeah, I think we have one follow up from Ashutosh.
Right, page speed stats for next. It's very good. The vitals, the web vitals report, they have really good analytics. They charge a bit more, but that's nature of the game. They have a good set of analytics which tells you your TTLs and how many what your time first render component, right? Those kind of things. We haven't still dug really deep into each of the attributes there, but the marketing team or the analytics team have identified certain parameters which are already present in the page speed analytics.
Great. So you are also using Vercel, right? Then,
Versal, yeah.
yeah,
Versal is a bit expensive. It's like per user about $30
yeah,
if they have to commit from GitHub to Versal. But the whole solution together, given that the commits are very fluent, so every PR that is raised, right, you can visualize it on Versal without having to download the code and run it locally. So if you tell a developer, develop this piece, you can go and visualize it just when the PR is present. So the integration pieces are very well developed.
yeah. So like, how is your experience? Like, have you run into any limitations? So I was also looking into the Vessel plan.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I have a paid plan, but I was worried like, will I hit into any limitations like number of commits or number of APIs?
There is no limitation as such on that. The only thing is, uh, I don't know whether it's the factor of the local build. So when you run a local build or using the Next.js libraries, right, it's slightly slower because it builds the page at development time, right?
Mhm.
But when you deploy it to Vercel and then you try and navigate across the routes, it's there's no it's very good, right? So that was a limitation, and along with that we had some initial hiccups because we didn't switch on the JIT, the just in time thing for Tailwind. So it was compiling Tailwind libraries, and Tailwind just bloats very soon, and it was slowing all the developers up, and that was the issue. But as soon as so Next.js has a recommendation for JIT for Tailwind. As soon as we turned that on, things started going smooth, right? And then their salespeople, they keep nudging you to upgrade and do that, but that is common.
Great. So I think we have like a couple more questions from Formic regarding Formic.
Uh-huh. Right. So the problem with integrating any of the validations with the form itself is a first principle problem. So it is better to separate your validations in the UI piece, right? You write a schema where the form field validations are well defined, but this stands outside the JS file, outside the JSX file, right? You have a separate file which is a schema definition, and there you are able to say if your date is greater than now, then throw validation, and all this gets bundled up into the errors that the use form eventually is able to hold a reference to, right? So if I read the question, I try to use Formic for banking application, multi-step forms everywhere, several validation API calls based on different conditions. In the end, felt it would have been better to write own functions. Now, this is a problem with abstraction. I think the component was very muddled by not having separate concerns for handling API calls or for handling validations or for managing the form fields itself. So probably a little more focus on devising or separating out the proper pieces in the right places could have helped you in Formic also.
Great. So we have one more question.
Does React Hook Forms support file validations like image or PDF upload? So what does that mean? Do you mean the content of the image, or is just that if the file is available or not? If it is just the first basic thing, then it definitely does, because it holds a reference to whatever is being uploaded. So it is easy to evaluate. So end of the day, the schema evaluates when the validation is requested for. So it can tell you if the field has a reference to any value or not. But if it were to think about the image or PDF, I'm not probably ready to answer that question. It may require a little more detailing.
Yeah, maybe we have to implement some custom logic inside,
Correct.
validation function. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
One more question from Dhaval.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Can we create a common component of each form control while building, or how do generally production level app organize common type of controls? Yes, you can create a component library, and that is a recommended way, because only your application knows how your forms need to look like and how they need to behave, right? What are the states they need? What is the behavior they have to do? Right? How do generally production level app organize production level apps? As far as my understanding and experience, it's organization level to some extent. So given a set of apps, or a given set of solutions that are being devised from an organization, they tend to develop a component library which are enforced for consistency across the organization, the thing, and they will definitely have a component library. And the component library, what are the provisioning, what they offer, that is all independent to the implementation. So yes, yeah, they do have form controls while building. Yeah.
So we have one question
A-
on Nest.js.
any idea how we can archive Next.js custom caching outside Vercel? Uh,
How we
no,
can
sorry.
achieve, I guess.
Okay. Achieve Next.js ISR custom caching outside of Vercel. Haha. Now, that's a tough question for me, but I've heard that Netlify also solves for Next.js deployments. How much they provide for SS? I'm thinking that's Next.js SSR or IS. What, I don't know what ISR is. What is it? Any idea, Kiran? ISR custom key.
No, Arun, can you clarify what ISR is? Yeah, could be SSR.
Okay.
Uh,
Achieve SSR custom caching outside Vercel. No, I'm not able to answer that.
yeah, I think yeah. So I think Nest Image also does a lot of work on the Vercel, right?
Optimizer. Yes, 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 yes.
Optimizations. Yeah.
Correct. I think from what we've experienced, Next is strongly produced and maintained by Vercel. So they keep putting out releases, and their support also is for enterprises pretty decent.
Okay.
Why
Okay.
React Query?
So I
Okay, which
think someone was ISR means like maybe it's an SSR with a timer to
SS?
rebuild
Yes,
something like
yes,
that.
yes. Okay, understood, understood. That's for SSG, I think. Static site generation with the fallback thing. I don't know of
Correct.
any other hosting platform that helps with that.
Yeah. So you are getting a lot of questions. Now we got a question on why React Query instead of SWR.
Right. So SW is very similar. React Query is from an author who had written React Table previously. The design patterns are very easily understandable. Their caching mechanisms are also pretty swell. The way they provide for the query client to be exposed and managed, configured, on a global level, that is a neat aspect. Um, Otherwise, SSR, SWR, stale while revalidate is the concept is almost the same. Having where you don't want to do the state management yourself. So React query we would give one notch above SWR, but almost the concept is same.
Yeah.
What are the ways we can improve performance of our React app and the best practices to use API calls? So API calls, it's a very subjective question in terms of what your app needs to provide and why you will need to make those API calls. Basically, it depends. So if you have a lot, see, in a solution where you are creating sales invoices or you're creating payment receipts, right? You would want to fetch all the customers initially together. So that's one API call rather than making several ones while creating each of those documents, right? So it's very need based and it has to be considered that way. Best practices to use API calls more than the usage, I would say. How you organize your code is more important. You will probably need in React terms, you'll need to separate the calls into a service and then use it in a container so that your presentational component is not disturbed, right? And then better, because the API responses are can manage surmountable data. So it does not need to be that you have to make so many calls to get so many things. For certain things, you make one call. For certain things which are not required on the client, most at all times, you don't make that call. Make it only on demand. So how can we improve performance of our React app? Now this one is also again piecemeal thing. The kind of libraries that you use, like moment.js, if you use, it bloats up very soon. So you want to make sure that you only use a specific module that is there, because it brings in a lot of locale things. And then if you're looking at a very large component which has a lot of imports, you want to break that down into dynamic imports so that it doesn't slow your initial load time, right? And then how you render the app is a design issue. You probably don't want to show a lot of things too soon to the user. So you show certain things, and then when he makes a choice or makes a selection, then you show the rest of the form, right? Make it intelligent on the user digestion, or the how he can what do you call that, coherence, I think, right? So those are bits and pieces that every time you pick up something, there's no one formula to improve your performance. But if you look at the performance tab on the Chrome DevTools, they will definitely help you when your app is slowing down. There is a nice library called WDYR, why did you render, right? Which helps you understand what caused the rendering of the component. So additional renders can be removed in case your context is spitting out too many dispatches.
Great. Thanks a lot, Ravi. I think
Thank you.
we keep getting the questions, and if you like to hang out in the YouTube chat for a bit and continue the chat, you can do so. Maybe we'll
Right.
move on to the second talk because we
Sure.
are running
Thank
out
you
of
so
time.
much. Thank you so much for the
Yeah,
opportunity. Pleasure to meet you.
yeah, yeah. Thanks a lot, Ravi.
See you soon.
Uh, yeah, see you. So we'll get started with our second talk. So our second speaker is Sriram from Microsoft. He will be talking about React Native. Uh, so Sriram, you can get started.
Hey everyone. Hey Kiran. So thanks this is my first talk at React Bangalore and Reactify in general. So thanks for accepting this talk. Firstly, I think it's pretty clear what we're going to talk about. React had a new alpha release in June, which is React 18, and this talk is primarily focused on that and like what are the new features, how things have changed, what are the improvements that it offers, and a bunch of different things like that. So a little bit about me. I hope my screen is properly visible to everybody. Cool. So I'm a software engineer at Microsoft. I work on Microsoft 365 and Office 365 which is all the applications that involves the Office, Word, and everything. So I like to write open source software. I've been doing React for a couple of years, and I like JavaScript and Node, Linux, and I'm also learning Rust, which is my newfound love now. You can reach me at Sriram Balaji across Twitter, GitHub, LinkedIn, most places. I'm at Sriram Balaji. So enough about me. Let's get started. So what are the out-of-the-box improvements? When it comes to React 18, it offers a bunch of different things, but it might be since this is a 30-minute talk, I'll probably try to provide as much condensed information as I can. I'll not talk about a couple of different things, but I'll focus on the main differences between the previous versions and the new version. So we have a new root API, which is a React DOM.create root. There are like a bunch of other concurrent APIs like start transition, use deferred value, and a bunch of others. So only a couple of them are documented at this point. So I'll be talking mostly about the start transition API and the create root API, which are documented right now. The rest I'll probably not take up in this talk. And you have automatic batching of state updates. So people might be aware of what a state update, what happens when multiple state updates are sort of batched together, and how that behavior is more consistent in React 18. I'll talk about that a little bit, and how and also talk about people who have already are used to concurrent mode. There was a large hype around concurrent mode, and there was a delayed. There's a long delay with suspense in concurrent mode, but and how React 18 sort of brings in an opt-in sort of concurrent mode as a concurrent feature of sorts, and also ensures that there's like better smooth upgrade and whatnot. In this talk, I'll not be covering about suspense and SSR and suspense queries because it's like a large topic altogether, because there has been some significant change in terms of the suspense architecture itself, is what I see from the documentation. Right. So, okay, all that is great. Everything looks fancy. Should I upgrade now? Like everybody here is in a React meetup on a Saturday afternoon. I'm sure everybody is enthusiastic enough about React, but you probably shouldn't if you're on a production application upgrade, because it is in an alpha, and like any library that you use, you do not want to upgrade to alpha software unless and until you're sure what you're doing, right? But if you're a library author, you definitely should, because there's like a bunch of things that are changing, and you might need to run some production experiments to sort of help you towards that transition, right? And so an official release timeline looks like it's going to take a couple of months at least. So so that by the time it matures, if you're not sort of living on the edge, you don't have to worry about it. But if you're someone like me, you can go wild. Right. So now that we're clear what the release timeline is and everything, let's see, how do you upgrade, right? Like, how do you install? I mean, this is pretty obvious that you just do npm install of the React Alpha and the React DOM Alpha. I'll be talking only about React DOM and React for this particular talk, right? So we're used to this particular line of code, right? We are used to seeing this particular line of code where we have a container. In our case, this container is going to be a root element, like document.get element ID of root or something like that, right? So what we're used to. This is the first sort of the thing that renders your app component inside of a particular container. So what changes is so you have a new root API altogether. So this root API is a create root. They have a function in the React DOM library itself. So that function is where you would pass in your container, which is again your root element that you get by your ID, and then inside that root is where you would render your application. So what's the main difference, right? Why do you have two different APIs? So React 18 ships right now ships with both the legacy API and the new API, just for clarity, right? So they have two APIs. The main reason is what I mentioned earlier, is they wanted a much smoother upgrade process, and introducing such a breaking change in like a very this is sort of the main thing that every React application has. Like, this is very common across React. This is the line that is common across every React application. So in order to sort of smoothen that process, they have both the APIs right now. So what the difference between both of them is, when you say the React DOM.create root, you're automatically opting into concurrent mode. There's literally a flag in the React DOM flags that will just gets checked when you're using this particular function. So And if you're using the legacy root API, things still remain the same. You can still use it. But the thing is, it would come with the deprecation notice. If you have upgraded to React, if you have done this particular step and you're still using the legacy root API, in your browser console, you would see a deprecation notice saying that this is going to be removed. So at some point, there would be a breaking change, whereas React DOM.render will not be there, and everybody would have to switch to a React DOM.create root. I think that's the plan. Eventually, whether or not it shapes out the way they wanted to is subjective, right? We have to see how it goes. But this enables concurrent mode by default. So this is sort of the opt-in strategy of what I was mentioning, where you React 18 allows you to opt in to having concurrency in the way it renders, right? So that's what this brings to us. So okay, that's the new root API. That's cool and all. I'll talk about concurrency and a little bit about the concurrent mode and how it has changed. What are the concurrent features it offers in the next part of the talk. I'm more I'm very sort of what sort of excites me is things like automatic batching, which is very it's sort of something that you don't think about in your day-to-day writing front-end code, but that's something that makes performance much better. So what is automatic batching? Let's see what is batching first. So you have like a bunch of set state calls. Imagine you have like a bunch of series of set state calls, right? You don't want every set state call to cause a re-render. So you want all of the set state calls. If there are multiple set state calls that are happening, you want them to be batched into a single render. So that happens. It happens in a single render. You don't want to have multiple re-renders. So there's already some automatic batching that is going on today, even in React 17 and before, right? And even on React 17 and React 18, before React 18, you have some sort of automatic batching, but it's not consistent. And the main thing here in React 18 is you have consistent automatic render batching in multiple different scenarios, even in scenarios that never worked earlier in React 16 and 17. If you also don't want to automatic batch your your state updates, you can use the Flushsync API, which is I think the recommendation of the React team is that you should not use this Flushsync API unless and until you're sure what you're doing. So what the Flushsync API does is takes the entire render tree and then tears it down and then flushes it and creates it sort of renders it again. Basically, you're just forcing a re-render of sorts. And there's no batching involved when we are doing Flushsync, right? So that's what it is. Um, so that's the thing, right? Like, so, but we want to know, so we do want to know how it works today to sort of understand what makes it different from the React 18. Like I'll provide sort of a pseudocode-ish explanation of how it happens today, and also post the references in the end of where I referred all of these things from. So there's apparently this function called the unstable batched updates function. People who are library authors may already be aware of this. So this is a function that that sort of even in React 16 and 17, if you want to sort of batch your updates, you could use this, and it is marked unstable. That's the reason, hence the name. So if it basically takes all of your state updates and batches them into inside a callback inside the unstable batched updates function. This is and all of this batched updates are run in a single render pass, right? So I'll sort of show the pseudocode of what it looks like, right? So internal handle event is what imagine this is how your this is happening inside of React, right? So we have jumped into React land right now. You guys are all here. So with me right now. So so you have an internal handle event, and user provided event handler could be something like an on change or an on click or something like that. It could be anything. It could be an event handler which has like a bunch of set state updates or something like that, right? So the batch updates. Imagine a batch update is a queue, an array which is like basically a queue, and every set state update, imagine all of them are going inside this batched updates array, right? So every set state, all set state calls in a given context inside a given function will go inside this batched updates function. And so as you can see in this callback, right? In this callback, this inside this callback, this batched update functions gets populated. It gets populated with all of the set state values. And then finally, you can see that the render with queued state updates thing is called. So basically what this is doing is a callback which has event handler. The event handler has all of your set state functions, and those set states will be pushed into the batched updates array, and all of them will be rendered in a single pass, right? So this is how batching works today. But there are certain cases where this does not work, right? So I'll ask a quick question if someone wants to answer this, right? So this particular piece of code, how many render passes would you think this would take, like before React 18? It would be great if someone sort of, if you could put it in chat or like however that works. I'll wait for a couple of seconds to see if I get any answers. All right, cool. So, basically, what happens here is the first render. These two are batched, right? So there's the handle button click, which is the user provided handle, right? So that's the user provided handle, and those two set state calls are batched. But what happens? What sort of is weird, or something that people might not be immediately evident is the second set count inside that is called inside the promise.result.then that causes a re-render, and there's yet another re-render that gets called inside of the set count. So just reiterating, the first two set state calls are batched, and the set state call, the set count calls that are there inside the promise callback, right? The promise.then callback, they are not batched. Every set state, if you have 10 set state calls, all of them will cause a re-render. That is the behavior that is there today, and this is sort of is non-performant if you think about it in a way, right? So just going back to this piece of code that I show you of how it internally is implemented, so it might sort of start to make sense what it means, right? So in this case, you see this handle button clicked inside the function itself. It's in the function call stack trace itself. You have both the set count and set button clicked. And that's the reason why you would see that this batched update function will get these two batched updates array will get these two set count and set button clicked set state calls will be pushed into this array. But what will not happen is this, since this dot then happens in a completely different place altogether. So it will basically happen in a separate event loop after the entire this function has finished in a separate callback itself. It is not happening during the event click handler, but happening sometime later, right? So that's the reason why it will not be batched inside. It will not come inside the callback of this particular batched updates, and it will, every one of them will cause us an individual re-render. That's the reason why these two things cause a separate re-render. Hope that is sort of clear. So what changes in React 18 is that now you have consistent behavior, even in scenarios where you have a promise.then, you have a promise, a callback that is available. So even if there is a promise.then, even in that place, you will have automatic batching of set state updates. I'll show a quick sort of demo of this in like a code sandbox, and I think we'll go from there. So So I'll just show a quick demo of how it is today to sort of yeah, cool. So it just there's a simple button here, right? So there's a simple button, and I'm here. I'm simulating. So you just take a look at this. This is just a button with just a simple counter, right? And there are two set states, which is like a count and a flag. And based on if this is a if the flag is true, you make this as we change the color of this particular thing. If it is false, you don't, right? So if I click on this handle click, right, you can clearly see that. So this log events function is what is just console.logging render, right? When I click on next, you can see that the set state calls are happening, and there is the click function is clicked once, right? So this is, but you can see that the render happens twice. That's the behavior that I want to show. Why is this happening? Because there's this fetch data dot then, which is basically the same as the promise dot resolve that I showed you, right? Similar to there's a promise and then a set timeout, but you get the idea. It's very similar to that. So you have a promise that gets resolved, and the then callback causes a multiple re-renders. I can sort of show it to you again, right? So you can see that every time I click on this button, I'm having two re-renders. And this is not that's what I was sort of not mentioning, that re-renders inside of a promise.then callback or a set timeout will not be batched in React 17 and before, but will be batched in React 18. That's the behavior that changes. And this is, imagine, if you can imagine, like this is sort of a very contrived example. People are not writing just counters today, right? So in your production app, if you have like multiple, if you have a promise, so this is similar to where even if you had like accounts data equals await or fetch data, and then you have like a bunch of set state calls after, So if you have like a set count here, even that would sort of this will also not be batched because please ignore the error on the outside because it's not an async function. But even in that scenario, you would see a very similar behavior where those calls are not batched, right? I think that's pretty clear. So to also demonstrate that this works today without, if it is not inside a promise, here I'm just, there's no fetch data here. There's just two set state calls. And if you, on the right, you can see when I click on click, there's just a single render that's happening because these two state updates are getting batched, right? Cool. Now that that's clear, I'll go on to automatic batching, which is basically showcasing the behavior in React 18. So here on the left side, you can see we are on React 17, and here we are on React 18.alpha, which is on the latest alpha, right? Cool. So this is a very similar, exact same copy of code, but the only difference that you can see here is you're using the new root API that I showed you earlier, where you're using React DOM.create root and then rendering inside it, right? So now I click here, you can see that there's just a single render, right? So even if, so imagine this is this is a huge performance boost if you have like multiple set states that you want to do after a promise. This can be a network call or a set timeout or anything of that sort. It could be anything, but all of those set state updates will get batched in React 18, which is the difference in behavior that we are seeing, right? So that's what I wanted to show here, right? So now that so the automatic batching is great, and like having such consistent behavior sort of remove your it might not be immediately evident for folks who are new to React that having multiple set state calls will cause like a huge re-render or like a bunch of re-renders. So but having consistent behavior right now in like a very common scenario also, I think makes a large difference. So now we'll talk about a little bit about the concurrent features and APIs that we have, right? So what are the concurrent features and APIs that, so people might be aware of concurrent mode by itself. It came out sometime 16.x. We had a preview of concurrent mode somewhere, I think. But the idea behind that is that concurrent mode will make expensive page transitions less expensive. That's the point, right? If you have like expensive page transitions and animations and whatnot, and if you want to do like a bunch of different things simultaneously, concurrent mode sort of allows you to do it in a way. Simultaneous might not be the right word for it because I'll sort of explain what actually happens in the concurrent mode. Just a brief of the concurrent mode algorithm itself, but yeah. So it allows your UI to be more responsive in a way, and you can control how you React sort of updates your application when it can update your application. Let's look at the start transition API a little bit more sort of in detail, and I'll also cite some examples of this how the start transition API is. So what start transition means is that so if you imagine you have like a bunch of state updates, and if you want to mark some state updates as something that can be deferred for later. So you can mark them as transitions because they are sort of non-urgent and they are not sort of blocking or affecting the user in any way. So imagine you have like I think an example here is you want some piece of data to be highlighted, but if you also want like a large amount of you want the text input to be fluid, that would be an example which I'll also showcase later. Right. So any update, any set state updates that are wrapped in start transition will be marked as non-urgent and will be interrupted if there are more discrete events that are coming in your way. So what do I mean by discrete? Is like a click or a key press is a discrete event according to React. Because there is why it says it's a discrete event is that a key press, when you say HELLO, you want to type all of that. So it's a discrete event that has to be marked as urgent because the user is typing. The most important thing right now is the synchronous. You need to take in the user input immediately, and that's what is urgent, and it is not a transition, right? So that's the reason why. Those will be prioritized if you have if you can sort of move your non-urgent state updates into a start transition callback, right? So a lot of the scenarios today that we use debouncing and throttling, people who might be, a lot of you might sort of use debouncing and throttling in your day-to-day use cases. There's like lodash.debounce and throttle and whatnot. It's also probably a very common JavaScript interview question here and there. But in some of these cases would be rendered moot when you start using start transition. And I'll probably explain why that is also, right? So the reason why do we need to use a start transition or a concurrent mode feature is like you have like it's building apps is not it should feel fluid and responsive in a lot of ways. Like a very small action like clicking a button or typing input, it can cause a lot of things to happen on the screen, and this can cause us stuff like the page to freeze or like hang and whatnot, right? But the solution to that is prioritizing what needs to happen when, and then updating anything that is not necessary for later, basically deferring them for non-necessary, anything that is not necessary for later, is how you would solve that problem, right? And that's what start transition sort of offers to us. So a very small example of what the start transition API is, you can also find this in the React docs or elsewhere as well. So so you have like a typical example is where you have a text input, and then in the text input you set the set state of the text input is marked. It is an urgent thing because every time I type, I need that set state to happen immediately because that's what I'm going to show to the user, right? But the search query itself, the search query which I might be using for maybe search suggestions or anything like that, that set state is not urgent as the input value, right? That's what it means here. It is of course necessary, but the priority here goes to the set input, right? So but but if you remember, this is also if people who are used to debouncing and throttling, this is a very sort of a de facto example of right using debouncing. What you would do today is you would wait for something, you would sort of debounce your query, you do debounce your input from sort of triggering or hitting your API endpoint from getting the search suggestions and stuff like that, right? So this is a very common example today. But when you mark this, when you do this with a start transition API, you do not need to debounce it at all. And as the user keeps typing, React will just abandon. So so let's say the user is typing, and he has to type like a long text of like if he, say for example he types Bob, right? And he decides then he does not want, he just goes back and then he types to he starts to type Mark or something like that, right? So what you would do today is you would have a debounce that would wait for a X number of milliseconds, which is like a ballpark estimate that we all arrive at some point, and we debounce that call so that what happens is we make that API call only after a couple of seconds, right? Couple of milliseconds. But here what happens is so the input would the set state would keep happening for the input, and when he stops it would actually start setting the start transition will wait for for an arbitrary amount of time. That I think it waits for the tick next process dot next tick, if I'm not wrong about that. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but it waits for the next process dot next tick, and then only your set search query is actually updated. But by the time if the user actually comes back and erases his input and then retypes, you will see that this search query is not even updated. So it's basically React just abandons that work, of that search query, and then restarts starts what the original work or the urgent work, which is the setting the input value. So so why you don't need debounce here is if the rendering was basically fast enough to pause between any of the input events, you're not wasted any time at all. So you're not waiting for an arbitrary number of seconds that you have set that you think might is good for like the user to like this is like a gap that the user will have after typing is something that you arrive at, right? So that you do not have to do, and you're not wasting any extra time at all. And so you're not taking any longer time than what is actually needed for the rendering itself. They will be much clearer in in an example. So let me sort of go to Code Sandbox, this one. Yeah. Okay. So this is the example that I was talking about, where so this has like 10,000 names. This is like a huge list of names, as you can see, right? And the task here is, as I input data into this particular field, I want to highlight the exact name here, right? So let me sort of show you the behavior if you don't use start transition. What happens today, right? We save this quickly. Okay, so I'll just take. I have not added some scrolling behavior here and whatnot, but you get the point here, right? So I'll just type Laura, yeah, and I'm actually typing here, I am actually typing like a bunch of things, but you can see that the UI sort of hangs here, right? Because this is a large amount of this is a large list of names, and I'm not using the start transition API yet. This is in React. This is still in React 18, but I'm still not using the start transition API. So uh, so I'm typing Timothy, right? But I decided I don't want to type Timothy. Like, immediately I want to switch to some other name, right? But you can see that it tries to search for that without even I've not debounced this. There's no debouncing that is involved here also. But so what you can see is that this is not fluid. It's not immediately. We are not sure what has to be done here, right? Like, the UI is sort of choking because it needs to also process the input and also render the highlight, and that's taking like a bunch of time, right? So what happens is when I remove the set highlight is what causes this particular the name to be highlighted, right? So if you can see, it's just slicing of the indices based on what text is inputted. I think that's not the point is not how it is implemented, but like the what that start transition API is. But so if I now click on Leora, right, it sort of waits for a second for me to complete, right? So you can see that the user is getting instantaneous feedback that some processing is happening on the side. So yeah, maybe in like a real world scenario, this is again a contrived example, but in a real world scenario, you would not have so many names populated right away. You would probably like populate it from a search suggestions in a separate box of sorts, right? So that's what your real world scenario would be. But even if I want to I'm just typing Jack, and I decide I don't want to type Jack, right? I don't want to type Jack, and I want to type Ol, or I'll say, or I'll type Laura. As and when I type, you can see there's instantaneous feedback, and the input is not choking because we've marked the set highlight as a transition, right? And it is not taking like a bunch of time to sort of render that information because it is non-urgent for us. Here, our urgent input update is our set query, which would be your which is what the input value is, right? So I think that's sort of clear. This is an example. Is an example code sandbox. But there are some other examples that I found in the internet that I think might be interesting to look at also. This is written by Swizek on the start transition API itself. So this is like a complex math algorithm that renders like a bunch of squares. You might have seen this as like a rendering performance benchmark of sorts, but it is please don't ask me on the math about it. I have no clue. This looks cool, and it sort of demonstrates start transition. That's the reason why I have it here. So uh, so let's not use start transition right now, right? I will let me just put it. You can see I'm actually moving the slider left and right. Every time I move the slider left and right, it basically renders exponential number of squares, right? That's what it is right now. And this is also CPU intensive. It's not like an easy thing for both the browser to do, right? So but what seems to happen is the slider here, even though I'm moving it chokes because it needs to do a lot of work here, and that's the reason why the slider chokes, right? So now let's see. I've started using the start transition API, and you can see that this is very fluid. Like it waits for a couple of seconds. Although it waits for a couple of seconds, it's still the rendering of this is is smooth because it waits. It only does not render the squares unless until it is required, right? And the user input and the user feedback is still very fluid compared to what the previous experience was, where it chokes a lot, right? Just to drive home the point of what the difference is between concurrency and this thing. This is, I think, built by the React team itself. But yeah, so this you might have seen this. I'm not sure if you have, but so the I'll show you the difference between debounce and concurrent, right? So this is again an input, and this data here is populated based on how long. This is junk data, but based on however long the input is, you would see that the things change. So let me type hello, and there's like a debounce that happens, and then after that you can see that there was it changed, right? So again I type yo, and then it waits for a second, right? But now I switch to concurrent, which uses start transition behind the scenes. I'll try to find the code for it. I was not able to, but if I type the same hello, you can see that is very responsive, sort of very instantaneous feedback, right? Because here we are not waiting or debouncing for an arbitrary number of milliseconds to show the user the output, right? So that's the reason why this is much more fluid and responsive. I think that's sort of explains the start transition API. But right now we've gone we've done so much of talk, so much of concurrent. We've said there's so much I think the word concurrent has been told by me like a bunch of times in this particular talk, right? Like there's a lot of hype also, and this often concurrent rendering is what we saw. But the main for people who have followed React is the thing is that there's no concurrent mode. Sorry to spoil your the hopes of concurrent mode, but there's no concurrent mode. But it's just a bunch of concurrent features that you opt in into React 18. So that's how concurrency is would be in React going forward. I think they've had multiple iterations of this, and then they've arrived at this as a way to sort of make people more sort of accustomed to how concurrent UI is and will be, right? I'll just take a small peek at how. So our models of writing code or writing UI applications are sort of in event-based manner, right? Like it's very linear in a way, right? That there is the user has an input, there is an on-click event, something happens, it triggers an action, there is a callback that happens at some point, and then you have. So this is very linear. So it's just a linear sequence of actions of such. It might be asynchronous, but it's still linear, right? But the mental model that we have is slightly has to adapt to this concurrent way, right? But even though they say concurrent, the way they've implemented this is they use this thing called as the it's people might be aware of this in your operating system slash if you have done CAS. It's they call this non-preemptive multitasking, right? So that's or non-preemptive scheduling. This has been there in React Fiber also. If people have in React Fiber also there was this cooperative multitasking algorithm, but they have tweaked it for concurrent mode in this sense that there is more granularity today with concurrent mode in this algorithm. For me, it was a little bit difficult for me to wrap my head around the sort of the nuances of that because I'm not sort of looked at how the code is implemented or stuff like that. This is sort of based on explanation that I've seen on GitHub discussions and I've read across multiple places, but I'm still sort of trying to wrap my head around that as well. But the gist of this explanation is that you have like a single rendering thread. So you have a single rendering thread that allows for other events like other main thread tasks. When I say main thread tasks, it could be a user typing, it could be network events, it could be an animation, the browser relayout paint, and everything, right? That all of that happens on the main thread, but there is a singular rendering thread. So imagine like you have like a long thread that you can sort of chop and do other stuff and then continue eating that thread. So imagine if you have like a big one huge noodle and you just sort of chop it into different pieces. One of those pieces you just put in some sauce and then the rest of them you just keep consuming. That's sort of a way that you can look at this particular diagram. That's I can think of a noodle and a spaghetti to me. Maybe it's 3 p.m. and I'm hungry, but that's another thing altogether. But so you have this render task, and there is a user input, and you stop at that point. Your high priority task here is to do that synchronous update. Here, your rendering synchronous update could be where you type the user types, and you have to show that data in that particular input, right? Which is again the high priority task, and then you resume or your original render task, right? But unlike an operating system scheduler, we cannot just say let's just stop this render, just throw this away. That's not how they cooperative multitasking algorithm is. That's the reason why it is cooperative, right? So it is cooperative in the sense that it yields control between React components with like and there is a heuristic to it. So when I say it yields control, it might sound similar to people who have studied like operating systems and whatnot. But basically, yielding control is just switching context of sort. Basically, taking control from one component and giving it to the other of sorts, right? Taking control from one component, giving to something that is much more, and then coming back to the main thread after like a period of time. So to think of this as just passing away control to one component to the other. That's how this cooperative multitasking algorithm works. So they sort of yield to the main thread every 5 milliseconds because they say that it's smaller than like a single frame, which is like that's the heuristic that the React team has chosen. The details of that or why they've chosen that as beyond me. I still need to do much more research to sort of understand this in a better way. But that's how this seems to work. You have like a single rendering thread, and it sort of switches. Imagine this is like switching to something that is more important than coming back, right? Say for example, you've been working and then so you've been working all day, right? This as in engineers, we've been working all day, and there is an important that event that happens is that you have to eat at, and it's sometime past 12 p.m. Or 12 a.m. actually, sometime past 12 a.m. The important event is that your body generates this urgent event which is called as the hunger, right? And you respond to that, but you come back to your original render task, which is actually writing code. So that's how I've thought of this as you're also cooperating because you're also cooperating with you yourself and your mother also, right? So that's how I think of this as the cooperative multitasking algorithm, right? In a way. So but taking all of that, but the main takeaway from for me or anybody who's watching this talk is that the future of concurrent React is very exciting. You have a lot of things that are coming that will make by default out of the box your app might be faster in things that it's doing. There are things that are bound to break, and I'm sure that the React team sort of will address them because a lot of things are still in alpha. You can still provide feedback and whatnot. I'll provide references to. I've provided references to all of this. I suggest that anybody who's watching this talk to go and look at the React working group. So React has like a very community focused thing right now where a lot of discussions are happening on the React working group itself, and like they have like a lot of different discussions. Even though you're not interested in React 18, there's like a bunch of things, important things that are sort of mentioned even in the comments. Like if something is sort of not you're not able to wrap your head around, I'm sure someone has like a better explanation from the React team itself. Specifically the Elify or explain like I'm fine and the glossary, I found it really useful to sort of wrap my head around different concepts. And if you like interesting analogies and stuff like that, you can find them there. A mostly complete guide to rendering. This is something that was written by someone from the Redux team itself, if I'm not wrong. And so that also gives that is where I found the references to the unstable batch updates and whatnot. You can also find this slide deck is also open source, and the repository for that is I've attached it here. And all the inner workings and everything that I've talked about, all of them are in GitHub discussions in the React working group. So that's mostly what I had talk about. Thank you everybody. And
Nice talk, Sriram. Uh, so let's see. So if you have any question, you can ask now. So Soham says, great explanation.
thank you.
So do you have the link for the slides? Maybe you can.
Sure. Yeah. Where do I paste them in the?
Yeah, in the YouTube comments. So right
Give
hand
me a
side
quick.
there is comments, right?
Yeah.
So are you
I
able
see a
to?
private chat. Give me a
Yeah, you
sec.
can put it. You can put it in the private chat. I will post it in the comments.
Cool. Yeah. It might not be like 100% up to date. There might be a small change, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
mostly similar.
great. So we
Cool.
have
Okay,
like
we have a
one
question
question.
around server components.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not. Unlike other experiments in React, like I see server components as an experiment. Like concurrent mode is no longer an experiment because that's a feature that they're bringing, right? But the reason why I did not specifically talk about server components is because they themselves have mentioned that this could change significantly, and we know that there was a lot of hype around suspense and all the like there was a lot of promises also on suspense, and like it took a bunch of time for them to sort of figure that out, right? Server components is very alpha even for the React team itself, and I've myself not dug into it. Just and it seemed like a really cool thing to start off with, like a React officially supporting React server components, and like how it sort of, I think it makes it more easier for server side rendering and whatnot. But I personally myself have not included this talk because it's very alpha to talk about, I would say.
Yeah, makes sense. So yeah, so I think yeah, the slides will be useful. I think you covered quite a bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
So if you have any questions, maybe you can reach out to Shriram, maybe via Twitter or something.
yeah. Feel
Uh,
free to reach out to
I,
me on Twitter, and I can
yeah,
help
I
you.
think Soham has one question, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So on the how do we compare it with so again start transition also takes in a callback function, right? When I say comparing with debouncing and current, you should sort of think of it as comparing debouncing and the start transition function. As that's an official React team's demo that I showed you. It's not something that I created, but that's a demo from the React team itself. But you should sort of see that as a difference between how using a debounce, which just has like an arbitrary number of seconds. So in a debounce, you would provide a time or an x number of seconds where you are waiting, after which you are going to fire that call, right? So that's sort of what you would do in a debounce, right? You would not so that arbitrary number of seconds, it's out of you. It's an abstraction that you should not care about. And the start transition API will it sort of take in will do it in a concurrent way, where it will concurrently render what needs to be done. If there's something that is urgent, it will prioritize that, and if there's something that is non-urgent, that will be done after the process.next tick. That's how you should sort of see that particular demo. It also felt like a really cool demo to show, to be honest. So that's the reason why I showed it. But you should see that as a difference between debouncing and throttling versus the start transition API itself.
Great. Yeah, so that's all the questions we have.
Cool.
Yeah. So we'll take a short break right now, and maybe we'll get started in 5 minutes. If you want to grab some water or something, you can do so, and maybe we'll start around 3:30. Yeah, see you all soon.
All right. Thanks everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Sriram.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Uh, Hello, Naji. Yeah. So can you share your screen? Great. So yeah, hello everyone. So we'll get started. I hope you grab some water and we have like two more talks, and our next speaker is Naji. He'll be talking about integrating GraphQL into React apps. So without any further delay, I will invite Naji onto the stream. Yeah,
Yeah,
we can get
so
started, Naji.
yeah, thanks, Kiran. So, hi friends, I am Nazi Vohra, and today I'll be discussing integrating GraphQL APIs into React tab. Basically, let me give a quick introduction about me. I am a 20-year-old software developer currently studying in my final year of my graduation, and I love open source contributions, and sometimes I pen it down in my articles. Uh, so basically, what is first of all, what is GraphQL? So GraphQL is a traversal program that provides a complete and understandable description of the data in your API. GraphQL also gives clients the power to ask exactly what they need and nothing more or less in that API. And also, GraphQL gets us predictable results. So, for the talk purpose for today, I have developed and deployed my own GraphQL Public API. So you can play around with that API on this link. So we have our GraphQL API ready. So let's just integrate in our React app. So we can integrate GraphQL API in many ways, like using any GraphQL client. But instead of a GraphQL client, I'll be using a package called Oracle. There are mainly three reasons for me using it. Firstly, it is lightweight, powerful, and easy to use. Also, it is extensible. That is, it allows you to change how you fetch, cache, or subscribe to the data. And lastly, this is my favorite, that it enables us to use GraphQL in our app without much complex configuration. So let's head on to the docs and add Oracle package in our React app. So yeah, here we go. For the talk purpose, I have already installed all the packages in my React app to save the time. And so uh, we need to run this command to add Oracle package in our React app. Now, after adding Oracle to our web app, we need to configure it to use it. So, in order to configure it, I will create a new file, create Oracle client in my root directory, and here I'll create client, and for that I'll use a create client method from the Oracle library. And here in the argument we need to pass the URL of our backend API, that is uh, this one. So let's just paste it over here. Now we have created a client from the Oracle, so let's just export it. Yeah, so we have a configure Oracle in our package, but in order to use it in our app, we need to wrap our app, that is this whole our app in a wrapper provided by the Oracle. So I'll wrap it. Here we go. And in that provider, we need to pass that client as a props, which I just created. Yeah, so here we go. Now we have added Oracle package to our web app, and we have also configured it. So let's just query our uh, API. So we can also query our API uh, using the way it is displayed here. But instead of using it, I will be using another library called a code generator. And what is code generator? So let's just see it. Basically, GraphQL code generator is a command line tool that can generate TypeScript typings out of the GraphQL schema. It analyzes the schema and parses it and outputs code at a wide variety of formats based on predefined plugins and user-defined ones. The specialty of this GraphQL code generator is we just need to provide a GraphQL backend API to it, and it will generate all the TypeScript types for our web app or for our queries and mutations. So it will help us to not to encounter any errors or break our web, or it will prevent our web app to get to break out. So let's just head on to the docs and install this in our web app. So again, I previously said I have already added the package in my web app to save the time. So in order to install, we have to follow the steps. I am using yarn, so I will use this, then this, and in order to initialize it in our app, we need to run this command. But before that, I am using TypeScript in my app, so I need to add TypeScript plugin in my web app. So I'll run this command. Apart from that, we have also used this Oracle plugin. So we need to add another plugin, that is the TypeScript Oracle. Yeah, here we go. We also need to run this command and add the TypeScript Oracle package to our web app. Oh, sorry. So we have added all the necessary packages. So let's just initiate it. For initiating, we need to run this command. So let's just run it. We are building application with React. So select here I need to provide my API, and this is the path where it will take my queries and mutations. I'm using TypeScript, so I will select this, and I will go with the defaults, and I don't want introspection file, so I will select no. Uh, this will generate a config file. I will go with the default, and to generate the types, it is needed to add a new script to a package.json. So I'll name that script as gen, so that it basically generates the TypeScript typings from our backend. So let's just wait it to get it finished. Yeah, so here we go. It has completed. Now, as I have already said that I have used a TypeScript Oracle instead of TypeScript React Apollo. So I need to replace this with the TypeScript Oracle. And yeah, so we have all the prerequisites configuration. So let's just generate types. But before generating types, we need to write queries or GraphQL queries. So I'll write it over here. I'll create a new file, get post.graphql. Yeah, so I need to write the query to fetch post from our API. I have already written this query following the doc specified over here. You can also write your own query by following the docs and all the information given over here. I just copy and paste it from here. Yeah, so I have also added the query. So let's generate the types by running the command yarn gen. Yeah, so here we go. It has all generated the TypeScript typings for this get post query, and it has created the output in this file generated slash graphql.tsx with all the TypeScript types. You can see it has all the TypeScript typings. So we have our GraphQL query. So let's query it. I head on to my index.ts and let's just query our backend. I will use the query method just generated by my graphql.tsx. So use get post. Auto importing is not working, so let's import it manually. rc slash generated slash graphql, and here use post query. Here we go. Use post query, and in that, as you can see here, we need to provide one argument, that is the limit. This limit signifies that how many posts we want at a time. Like if I change it here to 20, it will send the 20 posts at a time. If I change back to 10, it will send the 10 posts at a time. So we need to provide this argument here. So in the variables, here limit, it goes to 10. So
Uh,
it
Hi
returns
Nanji.
two variable. Yes.
Can you slightly increase the font size?
Sorry. Font size.
Or
Okay.
can you increase the font size?
Yeah, sure. Is it visible now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it returns us uh, two variables, data and error. So we have our data. So let's just display it in our front end. So you can see the power of the code gen. It is prompting me with the autocomplete. Post dot map. I have already created the post component with the boilerplate, so that I can increase just a bit of pace. I need to provide text, post.text, title, and then the ID of the post. Mm, yeah, so here we go. So now we have uh, figured it. What's throwing an error? I have forgot. Mm, data dot. Let me rewrite it again. ID is post.id, is post.key, and title is post.title. And yeah, I'm missing text is post.text. Here I have, yeah, so here we go. So we have we have rendered the data. So let's see the results in the front end. So I'll simply start the development server. So let's just wait to get it started. Yeah, so here we go. So we can see that all the data that was displaying here is now being displayed here. So likewise, we can perform other CRUD operations as well. So let's just write one mutation for our, let's say, create post. So let me write one another mutation, create post. For this also, I will copy the mutation from here. You can also do that by following the docs over here. There is nothing uh, much complicated. So let me also write for the delete post and update post. So uh, delete post and update post. So let me just copy mutation, and for delete post, yeah, so we have all the required mutations. So let's generate the types again by running the script yarn gen. Yeah, so we have also generated. So let's query this also. So we need to update post on this button click and delete post on this button click. So I have the boilerplate ready. I have just remained to add the on click listener. So just add it. Firstly, let's head on to create post. Now the create post, we will also be using the method from the GraphQL code generator. Use create post mutation. Here we go. Now for the mutation, it is get it serves as the two method, but we don't have an interest in the first. So let's use the second one, create post. Yeah, so let's say here in the on click listener, add create post, create post. Now, as you can see over here, in the create post, we need to provide an input, that is post input, and that post input is basically title and the text. So here as well, we need to provide input. It is getting me autocomplete input, and here title and text. And this method will return us the error. Yeah, so let's if not error, then redirect us to the home page. Yeah, so here we go. So let's test this create post functionality. So I'll head on to create post, and I'll just simply uh, Saturday evening, Saturday evening text. So let's create post. Yeah, so we can see that it has appeared over here. Now let's also delete and update our post. So also add on clicks over there. So here in the update post, we'll also use the method from our code generator. Use update post. Here we go. Likewise, update create post, we are not interested in the first argument. So also let's call this method. Sorry, update post it is. Now for the update post, uh, we need to provide three variables, that is the ID of the post and the new title and the new text. So let's just provide that variables. So ID, that is post ID, and text and title. Yeah, so yeah, so post ID is string, so I need to convert it to number and it will be available. So if not an error, yeah, so here we go. So let's update this newly created post. So updated title, updated text for Saturday evening. Update post. Yeah, so here we can see that our post has been updated and it is in the with the help of the TypeScript types. So now let's perform our final operation, that is post deletion. So here we'll again use the method from GraphQL code generator. Use delete post mutation, delete post. Now here const wait, delete post. Now here in delete post, we need to pass ID of the post as specified in the docs over here. So let's just pass it and destruct this in the error. So if not error, then just reload the page. So let's get a hard reload and let's just delete this post Saturday morning. Yeah, so we can see that the post has got deleted. So likewise, we can perform many such operations with the use of such packages and in a much better way than the traditional way. Yeah, so that's all from my side, and thank you.
Hi Najik, nice talk.
Thanks.
Let's see if we have any questions.
Yeah, sure.
Snehit is
Yeah, sure.
asking.
So basically, it depends on the tech stack you want to you want to work on. So let's suppose let's take an example of JavaScript. You want to contribute an open source project which works on JavaScript. So first you head on to GitHub and search for the projects that are initially using JavaScript. And in that, go to the issues panel and search for the label that includes good first issue. So the good first issues are issues opened for the new developers or the that issues that are easy to solve. So you can start from there. And if and the open source community over GitHub is really very helpful. So in case you encounter any of the error or you find it difficult, the repository owners will definitely help you and get in touch with you. And in some of the repositories, they also have a Discord groups or Slack channels, so you can ask your queries over there, and they can help you out. I hope that answers your question. And so coming to the open source project, which are you asking? It varies, depend on the tech stack you want to contribute. If you ask me about the React JS in which I contribute, I started with a daily dev organization, and that eventually I contributed in Storybook, and then Jupyter Notebook, and likewise other organizations. So it varies.
Great. Um, so if you have any questions, you can ask now in the chat, YouTube chat. So we have Mohij Khan is asking, why is GraphQL better than REST?
Uh, Honestly, I haven't tried REST, but as far as I know that GraphQL allows you to select the amount of data you want in an API. Even if the API is offering much data, you can select which data you want and which data you don't want. So that basically gives the clients the power, which data, and it will eventually will result in the faster API calls and will eventually lighten up the application. That's what basically I feel. And yeah, that's why I used GraphQL.
So drawbacks of GraphQL. So have you faced any issues when using this?
Eventually, I haven't actually faced such drawbacks of graph in GraphQL. I am using it since 6 7 months, but I haven't encountered any. Maybe there might be some, but I haven't encountered in my projects. So uh, I haven't actually.
Okay. So what is the VS Code
For the
plugin you are
autocomplete,
using?
actually, I was using GitHub Copilot. So, and apart from that, another plugin was autocomplete, uh, auto close tag from June Han actually. Uh, so there were the two plugins I used.
So are you using tab 9 or something? No?
No, I haven't used.
Okay, okay. So I think that's all the questions we have. Once again, thanks for joining us, Nazing.
Yeah, thanks,
Uh,
Kiran.
yeah. So we'll get started with the next talk then. Pratim, are you ready? Yeah, you can share your screen. Pratim, you can share your screen. Yeah. So we'll get
Uh,
started then.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, intro to Webpack web tooling plus performance. That's the topic I'll be talking about. Who's the speaker? You know my name. My name is Pratim Mahajarika. You can call me Pratim. I'm full stack developer. I'm in my final year of engineering, and and I'm a little extrovert and a little introvert, depending on the situation I'm in. So yeah, you can connect me on GitHub, at Twitter, and at LinkedIn. I'll follow you back for sure. So what's the goal? So the goal is basically simple. We'll look into like what builds up a CRA, what are the things, what are the tools which set up a CRA. So if we go to the documentation, we can see that there are like four concepts. There are core concepts we need to get started with. I will cover these four concepts, and I will talk a little bit about code splitting, why caching, why it is important, and that's all I'll be talking about. So let's start. So I have this simple uh, folder structure. I have just a div ID of root, and I have two script source, and index is just nothing. It takes the div which has the ID of root and writes the inner HTML. Welcome to the talk, and I'm just calling the app function. Now, when I so now just a second, yeah. So we can see that this is getting served, but this thing has two issues. Okay, first issue is that if the index.js script is added before the app.js, our application breaks, because as index.js is dependent upon app.js, so index is accept wants the app to be in the global scope. Now this is one more issue, and the second issue is that now when we add everything, eh, when we add the script text, everything goes into global scope. So we have this variable where apple in the app.js equal to rupees 250, and where apple equal to rupees 950 in the index.js. So the apple in the app.js will be getting overridden by the apple in the index.js. Now let me just show you. Okay, so let me just refresh it. Let me go to the debugger, and let me put this. We don't want this as of now. So okay, now let me refresh it. So we can see that there is so when we add anything in the script tag, it basically goes into global. Now in the global scope, we can see that the app is undefined because there are two phases in the global. One is the like assigning the memory to the variables, and another is the code execution phase. Now when you execute this code, uh, the value of apple gets changes to rupees 250. So 250 is being assigned. Now when it goes to the index.js, it encounters the apple again. So since everything is in the global scope, and after that, when line number 3 executes, the value of apple is getting just get overridden. So this is the second issue, and third issue is that most of the libraries total nowadays are like npm install, yarn install. So you may not find a script text for some libraries also. So in that case, what will we do? And we are also maintaining the dependency graph by ourselves. So dependency graph as in index.js, if it needs app.js, app should be above index. And if suppose we want to include a heavy library tomorrow, so loaders or something, it was come above app.js. And we saw that how by changing the script tags, order of script tags, our application broke, and we don't want our application to break. So to handle this, Webpack comes into picture. So what is Webpack? So Webpack is just a bundler which takes our code, bundles it, and like gives our code into one big file. That's what Webpack does basically. Like bundles it and takes all our code and put it in a single big file. And if we serve that file in our index, in our HTML, in the body, everything gets loaded. So we'll go to documentation, and we'll just copy this. Now I have a webpack.config file. I'll just paste it. So what does it say? It says that first of all, Webpack takes an entry point, that is the source.index.js, and an output. Output is basically like where we want to generate the bundle. And so it says that path.result dir name. Dir name is basically the directory we are working. So Webpack talk, that's the directory, and we want to generate the bundle in the dist. So and the file name should be bundle.js. Now uh, to do that, if we do npx Webpack, the bundle is getting generated. If we inject this in our script tag, say source bundle.js, okay, it will not work because we have not exported it. So let's export our app for default app, and let's import our app in our index because index needs app now. So app needs to be imported from /app. Now, if we say npx webpack, we have one warning. It says that the mode option has not been set. Webpack will fall back to production mode. So more than these two options, Webpack takes one more setting, that is mode, and it has two types of mode. One is the production mode and one is the development mode. Now when we do npx Webpack, you can see that here asset bundle.js is being generated and it is minimized. So minimize basically means that the code which is being generated here, it doesn't have any spaces or semicolons. So it is looking like this. Now if we serve this, uh, you can see in the elements, if we go in the body, you can see that it is working nicely. Now this solves the issues of like maintaining a dependency graph also. And now let's go to the development mode and see how it's been different. Development, Webpack. Okay. Now, if we go to the bundle, we can see that this is a ton of code. Okay, that we don't. So that's the reason we don't set development code, because it is not minimized. So when the mode was in production, we can see that the it was a 172 bytes, and when it is in development mode, it is a 4.38 KB, which is like a lot more. So and here we can see that now it solves the problem of like everything is a module, and this apple we have here, where apple equal to rupees 250 in the app.js doesn't collide with the var apple equal to rupees 950 in the index.js, because now this apple is limited to in this scope only, and this apple is limited to in the app.js. So if we go to the bundle, we can see mm, apple. Let me just find apple. Yeah, here. So this apple is within this scope, and the apple which was in index.js is within this scope, this one. So we can see that these two scopes are not colliding, and that's what Webpack does. Like it helps us to write code in bundles. Like it helps us to write modular code. So now one issue is solved. Like now we can see that we don't have to maintain the dependency graph also. Okay. First it went to index.js, then it looked at, okay, it need apps. It went to the app and it put app above the index.js, and that's how we can see in the bundle. Okay, app is above index.js, and that's how it's getting served. So now loaders. So the next topic is loaders. So the concept of Webpack is basically simple. Webpack says that I'll do the import export if you want, and I will ship only JavaScript code at the end of the day. If you want more than say JSX, TSX, or CSS, you need to pass it to through the loader. So Webpack says ki if one more than something like JavaScript, pass it through loaders. So there are many loaders. We will look into one loader as Payable Loader. Okay. So Babel loader. So what is Babel? So Babel basically what it does is it basically takes our code, takes our ES6 code and converts it into ES5, and also like it also gives us the like the ability to write the latest code without worrying about the environment that our code will go and run. And also it takes care of like the JSS and TSX also, because browsers they doesn't understand JSX code, TSX code, and Webpack also it can ship only JavaScript code at the end of the day. That's why Babel. So let's just go into Babel. Sorry for the issue. Yeah, so let's go into Babel. Let's go into the let's say REPL for a time being. Yeah, so what Babel does now basically, it take care of the ES6 const apple equal to 5. It converts into variable. We have this arrow function. It gets converted into the function expression also. It also take care of the backticks, and it's converted into a normal string. So this is what Babel does, and it also take care of the React code. Let's suppose we have a function app. This is nothing. This is just turn on h1, and it's hey, React code, something like that. Now you can see here that how the React code get converted. So that's what Babel does internally, and that's why like Babel is important. We want to add Babel in our Webpack config. So how do we add Babel? We just take this code. Okay, let me go to our webpack.config and you say sorry. Yeah, so we're gonna test. Uh, yeah. So what does this line of code means? So it says that take all the JavaScript files excluding the node modules. We want to exclude the node modules because we want to keep the node modules how it is. We don't want to like touch it. Pass it through a loader, that is the Babel loader, and it has an option of preset environment. So what preset environment does now, it takes care of, as I said, it gives us the ability to write the latest code. So it takes care of the syntax and everything that will run in our corresponding browser, like any environment our code goes and run. So now we can see that I have like these few things. We have this const Ronaldo equal to Manchester United, and this is an arrow function of Messi. I don't know why I've taken that example, but yeah. So in the bundle, we can see that this variable const Ronaldo, this is S6, we want to convert it. So now we have included Babel in our Webpack config. Now if we do npx Webpack, let's see, okay, the const gets converted into var, and that's what Babel does. And that's super useful because we want our code to run everywhere. Like say browsers, say suppose Opera Mini or like UC browser, they might not understand the latest syntax. On browser, understand the latest syntax only if it is implemented. So what Babel does now, it takes care of all these things. Like it converts our JSX, TSX. For a time being, I have used only like Babel preset environment. If you want to add React to it, just you can go to the docs and just go through this. Then just you have to add this preset React, and your JSX code will also get converted, and that's super useful. Now that's done. By the way, it also took care of the arrow function. Okay, it converted into an function expression. This is pretty cool. Now, Babel. Now, Babel is done. Now, let's look into CSS. So, a little story about CSS. So, we saw how JavaScript files are being processed. Now, let's talk about how CSS files are being processed. So, if you write the CSS in one global file, say app.css, and that goes into the head, and our we it gets served to our app. But uh, there's an issue with that. Let's suppose we don't want a particular component in the view tomorrow, then we delete the component, but the CSS which is still there in the app.css remains, because now we have included all the CSS in one global file, and deleting that part of CSS will be hard. So what we should do is like write CSS for small bundles, so that tomorrow if we say like you should write CSS with the view. Let's suppose we tomorrow we don't want to use that view, we delete the view, and the CSS that is associated with that view also does not get shipped. So if we ship more code, now the user has to pay for more data also. And during the initial loading of the page, if the CSS is being used, that's fine. If the CSS is not used, if the unused CSS is being sent, it it basically it degrades the performance also. So now let's see how we can process CSS files. We will have this simple app.css. This is nothing. This is take the root, the div that has an ID of root, and we say color to red. Okay, now index. We go to index and we import dot slash app dot css. Now, if we do npx webpack, okay, it shows that it's a it shows an error. It says that you may need an appropriate loader to handle this type of file. So Webpack now it does not ship CSS. It can only ship JavaScript as I told before. So handle this type of file again we will use a loader, and that is a CSS loader. So this is the loader. So let's copy this code. Go to Webpack config and we'll just post in this rules array. So what does it mean now? Basically, like take all the CSS files and pass it through style loader and CSS loader. So what is CSS loader? CSS loader basically like converts our CSS into JavaScript, and style loader basically take the CSS and it injects the CSS in the head in the style tag. Now, if we do npx webpack, and now if we go to webpack bundle, okay, this is in production, but see, there's a lot of code because what style loader is added JavaScript so that the CSS get injected into our head in the style tag. Now, if you go here, we can see that what the style loader did now, it basically like injected the CSS in the style tag in our head. So that's how we process CSS files. And yeah, now so plugins. Okay, so I was not able to find a great definition for plugin. So what I came up with mine, like suppose you take a selfie. Okay, now you want to after taking the selfie, you want to edit it, you want to add effects to it, you want to crop it, you want to do all sort of stuff to look great. So that's what plugins is basically. Yeah, I think I mean let's look at an example, then it will be more clear. We'll talk about the HTML web plugin. This is the most popular used plugin. Basically, it takes the bundle that is being generated and it injects it in our index.html. Here we have hard coded the bundle. Okay, we don't want to like hard code this. We want to generate the disk folder, and suppose if we want to make some changes in the disk, and we don't commit the disk. Okay, so if we don't want to commit the disk, like how will the bill work on Netlify? Okay, so what do we will solve all this by using HTML over Webpack plugin. I've installed the dependencies before only. Let's take this cons HTML plugin. Mm, we will require it, and plugins. Okay. Now these plugins take one more thing, that is the template part. Let's include that also, because I take here template because whether you can supply template also, or like you can, it generates the index by itself also, but let's support our own template. So it's a part of resolve. Their name basically go to the source and take the index HTML. Cool. I think this is how it works. Yeah, fine. Now, this will give an error obviously because we don't have an index.html. Let's just make this. It has nothing. Okay. So let's get the talk like Webpack. This will have a div which is an ID of root. Okay, now we have introduced HTML web plugin. So we want our this folder to get generated. So now also it takes one more option like inject. And where you want to inject the file in the body or head, you can do that also. Now let me remove the this folder. Yeah, now you can see that the this folder is removed. Now if you do npx webpack, okay, and webpack has been initialized using a configuration for the some other API. Okay, cool. I just think I just did something. Let me go to the documentation, guys. Plugins, HTML web plugin. Sorry. Let's. This need to be below this, not inside modules. Yeah. Now, if you do npx webpack now, see what it did. It generated our disk folder. It also like created the index.html and the bundle which was generated. It also injected that bundle in the body tag. Now if we see, it works the same. Now every time you say you in the when we make a create reactor, we say yarn bill at the end. Now it does the same thing basically. It generates it and it puts all our bundle in the body tag. That's what it did basically. Now plugin. So code splitting. So code splitting is basically like converting our main bundle into separate into breaking down into separate parts. That was basically code splitting is. But there is more into code splitting, like why code splitting. So when our client it visits our site, it requests the code from the server. So when the server sends the code down the line, it sends a big bundle, that is bundle.js. And if you make some changes, suppose in the main.js, or you say suppose main is small change in surfacing like string, text, or in component, the user when it visits your sites again, he or she has to re-download everything. Okay, re-downloading of everything means he has to download the code which is being changed, and he has to re-download the code which has not been changed. Like most of our node modules like it includes like React Router, React DOM, React Redux. That doesn't change often. Okay, but he need to download everything. Okay, downloading of same code again and again is like, why should the user download the same code again? He should not download. So what we will do is like we'll split it. Okay, so we will split it into two chunks basically. This is called, by the way, this is called chunking. Like breaking one bundle into smaller chunks is called chunking. So we will split our main bundle, our like the this is our bundle.js. We'll split this into two chunks. One is the vendor and one is the main. So vendor will basically contain all our React Router, and main.js will contain our code. like split it into two code, and this basically means like split the bundle into two files and like cache the vendor bundle in the browser, and that's how it works. So when so there's a big difference when the client visits our sites the next time. So when the second time the client visits, now he or she doesn't have to download all code everything, since the vendor is being cached. That vendor.js will be like served from the browser cache, and only if and there will be call to get the main.js. And in this way now, caching coming into picture. So whenever you think of code splitting, you should think about caching, because okay, we have now divided the bundle. Now when to cache it. So why caching? So nowadays, so in today's era now, many people like not have great access to data. So not great access to data. If he or she has to download the same file again and again, it will like let the user to pay for more data also. And caching basically means is that pay that download only the file if it is changed. If it is not changed, don't download it. Okay, and browsers are quite smart. There's a, so that's what basically caching means. Now let's go into the GitHub. Okay, Webpack GitHub. Let me show you. Okay, now when I go to the Webpack GitHub, you can see here. Okay, the files. Okay, sorry, the files. These are being served from disk cache. Okay, if we see that a request has been made, but it was served from the cache itself. Like the same, like the code is not downloaded. Okay, this is being served, and you can see this that this is the hash. Basically, this is a hash. When the hash changes, then only the browser will request the code. Otherwise, it will serve from the cache itself. You can now go into here. You can see that the max age is like something. Maybe this is 1 year. Like you can go and read about this more. But yeah, that's the idea of caching. Now let's take the same URL and open it in the incognito. Okay. Now let's then open the spec and network. And now, if you say now, see, a get request has been made to the server to get these files. Okay, and you can see the every file is of like 46 KB, 33 KB, 44 KB, 44 KB, and this was downloaded. Okay, because incognito is a totally different environment. But if the user comes and refresh the same page again, like yeah, you can see that it is served from the disk cache itself, and it's quite helpful, pretty helpful. Okay, this is the basically the hash. uh, when this has changes, it will download the code, and in this way now, and in like this, like the user also gets, user doesn't miss out with some new features. Okay, so anytime you make changes in your code, like the hash changes, and yeah, you get the code. What's the time? Okay, let's put, let me how you can do hashing in our code also. Let me do that. That's simple. Basically, we go to here. We go to the see my distance, which is an object. Let me go and take this code. Uh, Let me just paste it. Okay. So what does this part of code means? So it means I split it into chunks, make cache groups, and everything which is coming from node modules, name it as vendor. You can name this anything, but most people name it vendor. And now we need to make some changes here also in our output, because now we will be outputting two files. Okay, one is the vendor and one is the main. Let me show you now. Also, let me include a heavy library. Let me import loaders from loaders. It just does nothing. It just console log. Hey, I'm loaders, and it just calls a join method. It just calls a join method and fixes an array. There's nothing. Okay, let's make it into a string. No, that is the issue. Okay, cool. Yeah. So now, just say okay. If we go to the webpack.config, let's for a second, let's not add optimizations. This comment is fine. Now, if we do npx webpack, okay, did it come? No, okay, sorry. Let's create rm minus rf list. Create a list and this particular terminal. So now if you do npx webpack, we can see that the asset bundle.js is like 527 KB. Like that's pretty big, and also it is in production. Let's make it to production. Like it works the same. Okay. Now, if we see, we can see that the bundle.js. Okay, so this is. So if we see that here, okay, this is. So if we see that the bundle.js is like 72.6 KB, because we have like included loaders. Loaders is a very huge library. Now this is like a very big file. We want to split it into two chunks. So for that we will add optimizations. Now when we add optimizations, let's just remove the list folder. Okay, just remove. Now if I do, just clear the terminal. If I do npx webpack, okay, what is the error? Invalid configuration, initialize, jingle optimizations. Maybe the spelling is wrong. Okay, it's optimization. Sorry. Shit, I don't know the spelling of optimizations. Yeah. Okay, multiple times as the file. Okay, now okay. See, now you are emitting two files. Okay, one is the vendor and one is the name. So we need to like tell that okay, there will be we have hard coded it. We need to say okay, the name should come here. If we do this, let's just clear a terminal, and if we do npx webpack. Now, see, there are like two bundles which are created. One is the vendor bundle that is of 71.4 KB, and one is the main bundle that is 2 KB. Okay, so this vendor bundle contains all our code, node code, basically all our React Redux, and all the, and our main bundle contains our code that we write. Now, to do caching, now what we should do is basically we should put a hash, content hash. So if we include this here, let me do npx webpack. Okay, it's getting dirty. Let's add clean equal to true so that the file which is not needed also gets deleted from the disk. Now if we do npx webpack, okay, now you can see that this container hash. That's what I told while I when I show github. Okay, this is the hash basically. This is the hash. Now, what you can do is like cache this in the browser, like configure index number in the server, and the user comes to visit your site. It does not have to download the vendor thing. Now, if we make some changes in our main code, let's say Apple like something. Now let's look at the left side carefully. The main bundle it will change. Uh, does it change? It did not change. Okay, I'll add one more Apple something. Okay, now it's a NPX Webpack. Did it change? I think it changed. So that's the idea. Like, okay, let's try why it's not changing. Webpack. Yeah, it changed. Now you see, we saw that the vendor bundle is not changed. So what you can do is like cache this in the browser, and the next time the user comes to visit your website, you'll like serve this from the cache itself, and the user has to now download only like one file down the line. One file. We can perfectly send two files down the line. Like it is not that issue. Like you have to download everything within one go. We can like clearly download two files down the line, which is clearly okay. And yeah, now the caching done. So yeah, what was left unsaid? So I wanted to talk a lot about on the performance also, which I have did in one of my apps. Uh, what I did there was I was using a lot of images that were not optimized. Like I changed only like so the performance was like 65 for the app. So I optimized the images. I have to did like dynamic import or something. I did React.lazy and the performance increased by 15%, which is like pretty good. So yeah, again, because of time, could not talk about those things. Maybe in the next meetup, I'll like talk about. And yeah, resources you can like check the Webpack docs, the Webel docs. You can watch videos of Sin Login. Like this is the best video you can get if you want to start it. If you want to like build your setup, if you want to build your React app setup, you can create now from scratch since you know now the things. Now, lastly, I am to thank Tane Pratap and Neojigam because building my first web app to giving my first talk. They- Tane helped. Okay, I never thought I'd be giving a talk, but after knowing Tane, then I joined Neojigam at Fab. Like everything got aligned. So yeah, joining Neojigam was a total game changer. It helped a lot. And yes, guys, do check out Neojigam. Uh, do check out Neojigam. Do follow Tane. Do follow Neojigam. Yeah, do follow me. So that's all for the talk. Yeah.
Yeah, nice talk, Pratim. So if you have any questions, you can ask now. So you are studying right now? You are in college or?
Yeah. In my final year of engineering.
Okay.
Next year I will graduate.
Okay. So which college?
RIT. D.Y. Patil is in Navi Mumbai.
Mhm. Mobile. Okay. Um, so you are into computer science?
Yeah, computer.
Com- So, like, I'm just curious, uh, like, how is the college curriculum? I know you are learning a lot from Neoji, but how is the college curriculum? Like, are they teaching JS now in the college, or
No,
you
no.
just need to learn on your own? So, so the college is about databases and DSA, those things.
Yeah, the same old curriculum.
Mhm. Sure. I don't think we have any questions uh,
Yeah,
at the moment. So, hello everyone. If you are on the stream and if you have more questions regarding the talk, you can reach out to Pratim on the Twitter. Uh, yeah, that's all. I think this is the last talk. So this is the end of the session for today. We have a meetup again next week, so you can join that as well. See you all in the next meetup. Bye
yeah.
everyone.
Bye,
Bye
Kiran.
Pratim. Yeah. Bye.